Hi there. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Arthritis Life podcast, where we share arthritis life stories and tips for thriving with autoimmune arthritis. My name is Cheryl Crow, and I am passionate about helping people navigate real life with arthritis beyond joint pain. I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for 20 years, and I'm also a mom, occupational therapist, video creator, support group leader, and I created the Room to Thrive self-management program. I am so excited to help you live a more empowered life with arthritis. We're going to cover everything from kitchen life hacks to navigating the healthcare system to coping with friends who just don't get it. Seriously, no topic is going to be off limits on this podcast. My interviewees and I share our honest stories of how chronic illness affects our lives. This includes discussions about mental health, sex, shame, pregnancy, body image, advocacy, self-acceptance, and so much more. You'll hear stories from all ends of the spectrum, from a person who's living in medicated remission from psoriatic arthritis to somebody living with severe mobility restrictions and severe pain from rheumatoid arthritis. You'll hear how people manage their conditions in different ways, like medications, mindfulness, movement, social support, work accommodations, and so much more. You'll also hear from rheumatology experts who just get it. We'll dive deep into the science behind chronic pain and what's the latest evidence for lifestyle changes that can help you thrive with arthritis, including exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress reduction, and more. This is your chance to sit down and chat with a friend who's been there. Ready to figure out how to manage your arthritis life? Let's get started.
Welcome to Rheumer Has It, the podcast that busts myths, highlights evidence, and inspires hope for living better with rheumatic diseases.
Through plain language interviews with experts, we offer actionable knowledge so you can thrive today.
My name is Eileen.
My name is Cheryl.
Join us as we bust myths
and spotlight evidence. So today we're going to introduce ourselves a bit and share a little bit about why we started this new podcast. So you might recognize my voice. I'm Cheryl. I'm a 43-year-old mom, and I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for exactly half my life. And I'm also an occupational therapist, and I created the Arthritis Life podcast and the Room to Thrive support program.
My name's Eileen. You may know me online as Chronic Eileen. About 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at age 29. At the time, I was working as an esthetician, and I had zero knowledge of autoimmune diseases, let alone rheumatic diseases. Of course, I had to know all about them when I was diagnosed. I started my blog, Chronic Eileen, in 2017, and since then, it has connected me with people like Cheryl and inspired my drive to make educational content as somebody who is going through the journey of living with this disease and coming from without a medical background. So that's really important so that people can understand a little bit better.
Yeah, and I just wanted to let you all know, if you've been a longtime listener to the Arthritis Life podcast, typically I do spotlight long form personal stories and provider interviews that help you feel less alone and more equipped to thrive. On Rheumer Has It, I'm going to be joined on all the Rheumer Has It episodes by co-host Eileen, and we want to do a little bit more compact, information-dense episodes, really focused on debunking myths and spotlighting important evidence in the field of rheumatic disease. So Eileen mentioned that we both met each other online because we were both doing similar work with sharing our personal stories and ways that we were figuring out how to live well with rheumatic disease and make sense of all the maybe conflicting information and advice online. I really loved Eileen's blog and how she was so down to earth and gave real talk about what it was like to be a single mom with RA. Eileen and I, to give a little more background into our origin story, we actually met in person for the first time at the American College of Rheumatology conference in Atlanta, Georgia in 2019. Right before the pandemic.
Yeah, so that was the first time that we met in person, even though we only live about 3, maybe 4 hours.
Yeah.
I'm in Vancouver, BC, and Cheryl is in Seattle, Washington. So this will be our project on rainy days. And ever since that one conference, we have probably met up at a number of conferences since. And we've collaborated on projects from online for other people living with forms of arthritis to presenting at the American College of Rheumatology conference as well. We particularly talk about a lot of the hidden symptoms of rheumatic diseases and the stigmas, myths, and misconceptions about them. And yeah, so I first found Cheryl in actually the Mamas Reaching Forward group. There was a picture of her sitting there with all the medication around her. And that so resonated with me because I was at the same time working at creating, how do we make our invisible illness visible? So that really caught my eye, and that's kind of how we met.
Wow, I'd forgotten that actually until today. Yeah, I do want to give credit to the photographer. I hired my friend Jessica Keener to do what I call the invisible illness photo shoot. And that was inspired. I wish I knew the person's name. It was inspired by someone else with an invisible condition who had done a similar project. They were laying on their couch and they had all their injections and medication bottles in front of them. And I thought, similarly, I had an immediate visceral reaction of this is so powerful. And when you live with an mostly invisible, hidden illness, there's just so few ways of making it clear to people that this is actually a serious condition. So I was happy to be able to hire her to help make it as visually appealing as it could be. And then I also found the Mamas Facing Forward group by Mariah Leach as just a lifeline as a new mom living with rheumatoid arthritis. So it's been really fun for Eileen and I to kind of connect further over the years, work more academically on some papers and I think, or on some research projects. And I've been really inspired by how Eileen has been involved in so many research projects as a patient partner. And that was something that has really just in the last 10 to 15 years started happening where researchers in all chronic conditions realize that we need to involve patients in all aspects of research. And so this podcast is a bit of a extension of that and a way of looking at the fact that so often research doesn't make its way out of the ivory tower or the really, really expensive medical journals. And we really want to find creative ways to bring research to patients. So I'm going to give it back to Eileen to talk a little bit more about why we formed this podcast and what our purpose is.
Yeah, so there is a lot of reasons I wanted to create this podcast. One is that on average, it takes 17 years for research to hit clinical practice. And I have been on the Arthritis Research Canada Patient Advisory Board since 2018 now. I have participated in a number of studies, many different kinds, or listened to researchers present their findings and then ask us as patients, how can they get this information out to the greater public? This could be, information about comorbidities, new medications, exercise guidelines, all sorts of things. And so I wanted to highlight some of the interesting research that the researchers that I collaborate with at Arthritis Research Canada are doing. And then I've also really wanted to start a podcast called Rheumer Has It, because I thought it was a really catchy title. And also to define like myths, stigmas, and misconceptions and bust them, because there are so many when we live with rheumatoid arthritis. From it can be cured with these herbs, it's not that serious, it's just joint pain. There's also many things. When I asked ChatGPT to tell me as many myths, stigmas, and misconceptions about our rheumatic diseases, it literally gave me a list of 100. So I just thought it would be really important to, you know, have two people who have lived experience with the condition, as well as bringing in researchers who or clinicians who can really speak to busting the wrong sayings that are about rheumatic diseases and highlight the evidence behind it. A lot of their work and the facts behind their work can really be eye-opening and tell you, herbs are not going to cure our disease. It would be great if it was that easy, but it's not going to happen. So that's why I really wanted to start Rheumer Has It. And I wanted to partner with Cheryl because she has much of the same vision as me. And we've worked on other projects in the past. And not going to lie, I wanted her platform so we can get this information out to all these people.
Yeah, no, and similarly, you have a following and as well. We want to combine our powers, combine our visions. I want to make sure, if you're listening, you might be like, wait, who is this podcast for? And similar to the regular Arthritis Life podcast, primarily when we're speaking, we're going to be speaking to a patient audience, a lay audience, but we also want this to be extremely value packed for anyone who cares about people with rheumatic disease, whether you're a caregiver, a healthcare professional, a student, a sibling, a parent. Anyway, I know my mom listens to every episode. Hi, Mom. Building off of what Eileen mentioned, I think that what I've observed as an occupational therapist and as a rheumatoid arthritis patient, I think one of the hardest things is balancing being open-minded with being skeptical and science-based and evidence-based. I think that a lot of times there's two different poles, two different ends of a spectrum. One is like somebody who might be the most scientific based by the book will say you shouldn't spend any time or any energy on anything to do with your illness unless it's 100% evidence-based and been subjected to numerous randomized control trials. That's the science part of my brain is really attracted to that. And the anxiety part of my brain is attracted to that black and white. Yes, I should only do things that are evidence-based. On the other side, there's the people who are like, well, let's be open-minded. Like lack of evidence doesn't mean evidence of a lack. And that's a huge, huge distinction, right? We want to help build literacy, health literacy, medical literacy, help people do those risk benefit analyses in their lives. And also, I've been thinking about this a lot with the current political climate. This is a quote said by Daniel Boorstin. It says, "The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge," which is huge, right? There's a lot of people out in the autoimmune world who they think they have all the answers. The answer is you just need to go on this herb. You just need to go on this diet. You just need to do this or that. And we want to help patients make sense of like, why is it that some of those claims are bogus? And where do we draw the line between outright bogus claims like this herb will cure it and areas where it's a gray area? Does that make sense? Is a long-winded way of saying that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like there is sometimes a lack of evidence behind certain things like diet, nutrition, certain herbs like turmeric and whatnot, because the studies are either really hard to do or they're just not really done, or they're
Yeah.
done poorly, or they're done in a very small fraction amount of people. And we always have to remember that what works for one may not work for another. I guess like the goal of this podcast would be just to educate and inform and inspire and empower people with scientific evidence, being able to put those questions and concerns into words and hopefully communicate with their healthcare professionals better or people in their community. One thing they could do is show one of these podcast episodes if you have somebody who is very adamant on, XYZ will help you, but maybe the evidence doesn't show that. So there's so many purposes for this podcast, and I hope that we fit a gap that is out there and help patients access research or information faster and in a easy to digest way, because a lot of the time this stuff is very hard to understand, and like how is it relevant to our lives too.
Right. A lot of times, the more academically rigorous or evidence-based something is, the more dry and boring it is. So something that I think you and I both like the challenge of. The challenge is to make this down to earth, fun to listen to, and super information packed and helpful. And so we are going to be interviewing some experts and bringing in their perspectives too. So you're not going to just be hearing from Eileen and I. Some episodes it will be just the two of us. Other times we'll have an expert. And you'll also hear Q&A style discussions maybe between us. And if you're wondering what else to expect, right now our goal is to have them bi-weekly or every other week. So if you're subscribed to the Arthritis Life podcast, you'll hear the Rheumer Has It episodes twice a month roughly, and then the traditional Arthritis Life podcast style, longer form interviews, personal stories, and some provider tips too, a couple times a month as well.
Another thing too, on the episodes that we don't have a guest, Cheryl and I will be discussing either something to do with rheumatic diseases, and then also kind of telling you some important things either with research or going on in the community, or something really interesting and juicy that we learned that week.
Yes, I love it. So just Really quick logistical point. If you're already subscribed on your favorite podcast platform to the Arthritis Life podcast, you don't need to take any further action. These Rheumer Has It episodes will all just show up in your feed. You also, if you want to see a video of this conversation or read the show notes to see all the details, including hyperlinks to things we discussed and a transcript, make sure to check out the show notes, which will live on both of our websites, like chroniceileen.com and mine, myarthritislife.net.
Well, thank you for tuning into the first and opening episode of Rheumer Has It. We are really excited for the journey that we're going to be going on creating this content for you. Please let us know what kind of things you would like to learn. What myths, stigmas, or misconceptions about rheumatic diseases do you want us to bust and highlight the evidence for?
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you later. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. This podcast is supported by Room to Thrive, an educational program I created to help empower you to live life to the fullest with rheumatic disease. In the program, you're going to learn evidence-based tools for managing all the ways rheumatic disease affects your life. And my goal is to help you go from overwhelmed to confident, supported, and connected in a matter of weeks. You can go through the pre-recorded modules on your own in the self-paced course, or you can take the course along with a robust support group of new arthritis friends to support you and cheerlead you along the way. Learn more in the link in my show notes, or you can always go to www.myarthritislife.net. And if you like this podcast, I'd be so honored if you took the time to rate and review it. I also encourage you to share it with anyone you know who might benefit from it. I also want to remind you that you can find full transcripts, videos, and detailed show notes with hyperlinks for each episode on the Arthritis Life website, plus full episode videos on the Arthritis Life YouTube channel. If you have any ideas for content for future episodes, or you want to share your story on the podcast, please send me, Cheryl, an email at info@myarthritislife.net. I can't wait to hear from you, and thanks so much again for your time.